All right, so we are live on YT and on TikTok. So let me just go through my quick spiel about what I'm going to try to accomplish here, and then we can get into some questions and some conversation. Um, this will hopefully be a sort of very tight, lean version of everything I've spoken about. So I'm just going to go over the 7 things I wanted to discuss because one, I'd like to give you guys some structure, but two, if we don't get to all of them, then you can later on look into these things, right? Because there's a plethora of information available to everyone to study these 7, what I think are the most important subjects and ideas and conundrums, really, that we're dealing with. That if we solve these, we can actually get to that world we're all trying to get to instead of stumbling continually. You might have noticed that this is titled "The Apocalypse is Always Tomorrow." Not only is that the title of a sci-fi book I've been working on for years, but it's also sort of um, a summation of the actual problem that we're dealing with. This idea that like we're always wishing for this apocalypse, whether it's a revelation or a destruction, and yet always uh, pushing it another day, pushing it another day. When is World War III happening? When is the global catastrophe happening? When is God going to return? Right, and we keep on. It's always in the future. It's never today, right? These hopes and dreams and desires we have of a better world, always in the future, but never today. And I want to discuss some of the reasons that is that the apocalypse is always tomorrow. It's also on. So we're on YT and TT. I don't want to mess with the algorithm of either one because these companies are in competition with each other. Another obvious problem in our society. I am on X and I tweet every now and then, usually about speaking out against the thing that starts with a G, because you're not allowed to really talk about it on the other ones. X is really the only place you're allowed to actually stand up against wholesale slaughter of human beings. So, section 1 is on the Apocrypha, God and time, and our relationship to and our conceptions of God and the end of time. Right, this idea Jesus is coming down to save us, the Galactic Federation, this is a school, this is all going to make sense in the end. We've been waiting for this apocalypse or Armageddon for 2,000 years, and every time we think about some sort of collapse of society, many of us are happy about that inside. And it's not so much sinister, although maybe sometimes it is. It comes from either a desperate desire for good. So you want the destruction of this world because you desperately desire a good one, and you feel locked inside of this trap because you don't feel like you can do anything in the world. Every time you try to make things better, every time you see somebody else try to make things better, they're stomped out. And so there's this desperate desire for a wholesale catastrophe because you think maybe that's the only way to break this very corrupt system. And that may actually be true. And then the other side of it is a sort of nihilistic abandonment or nihilistic abandon, right? Where you're just like, there's people out there that are just sick of this and feel like life is meaningless and just wish the whole thing would be destroyed anyway, right? So kind of like a large scale self unalivement, right? It's kind of like, so I forget who says it, but they're like the Cuban Missile Crisis was kind of a representation of the human race thinking about unaliving itself as a collective. And so our relationship with God and time in this way, God is a transcendental object at the end of time, and this idea of a time ending, whether it's an era, epoch, aeon of civilization, or time itself being destroyed and reality disappearing. Our relationship with that comes from 2 places. One, this desperate hope and desire for things to return to normal. And I don't mean normal like a romantic conservative dream of like, oh, what it was like in the 1950s. We as human beings are in a extremely abnormal state of being. That's not healthy. That's not good for us. We're in absolute chaos, and we desire to return to the normal state of our very being as biological creatures, as conscious creatures, and potentially as spiritual creatures. Next, we're going to be talking about the nature of good and evil. and the confusions we have about what is good and what is evil, and that being at the crux of many of our problems today, is that we can't actually agree upon what is actually objectively good and what's actually objectively evil. On top of that, the fact that evil does run the world right now. Whether you want to say there's like 20 evil bad guys that run all industries and politics and all that, or we want to talk about the inner evils of fear and guilt and all that, it has taken hold and is basically in power in a sense. And the reason for that is because evil has an individual and immediate advantage over good. And that's another thing people do not like to talk about. It's very scary to admit that the only character or superhero, supervillain that could definitely beat Batman is evil Batman. It's a logic proof. The reason being is because evil Batman can do everything that good Batman can do, has all the same intelligence that good Batman does, except the evil doesn't have any rules. It doesn't have to play by any rules. So the evil Batman can do more things. And at the same time, the evil Batman can appear to be good through deception, where the good Batman has to be honest about their faults. And so they lose, faith from the people, et cetera, et cetera. The evil can appear whatever they want to appear as, which is advantageous to them. And so there's so many, it's the same kind of idea, Superman, Batman, any particular character, the evil version that doesn't have any rules has an immediate material advantage over the good. This is why psychopaths are disproportionately represented in like Homelander. Homelander will beat Superman because Homelander, like I think there was a meme on here, he'd use children as body shield. He'd just like literally tie children to himself, right? Superman wouldn't do that. And so Superman couldn't use his laser beam, but then Homelander still could. Right. And so this is just like kind of like it's a logic proof. And so that's an issue. That's a struggle that we have. That's sort of at the fundamental basis of the human nature and reality itself. More options, more strategies, more tactics, will to power allows for the person who is evil to succeed. Now, the reason I say that is because there's actually good news. But the fact that the majority of the people cannot come to that first conclusion, that first piece of bad news. They can't get to the really good news. Okay, so, let's just get right into it. But I'll just tell you the other, because I want to stay here because we're on a roll. The third section is the weakness and tyranny of the masses, which connects to this idea of bad ideas that people have, which move entire populations in the wrong direction. The Christ and the Antichrist, and what they really mean. The theatrical world, the world that is presented to us that is not true and is meant to propagandize us, brainwash us, and lull us into a calm. The invisible world, that which is magic, that which is supernatural. And then Armageddon, the true war. Okay? So let's discuss more about this idea of good and evil. So because people can't come to terms with the fact that evil does run the world right now, in a sense, based on the things I outlined, either they're actually just like evil people or there's evils inside of them like fear, guilt, pride, arrogance, whatever. Because people can't come to terms with the fact that they have to be the good force in the world that overcomes evil, they rely on these things like God's going to come and save them. You have to understand something. People that say light wins, God wins in the end, the Galactic Federation has us under control, Jesus is coming to save us. This is just the spiritual version of keep calm and carry on. It's a psychological virus. It's not happening in and of itself. There is no inherent quality to the universe which is going to put an anthropomorphized God figure of good and justice who's waiting in the clouds somewhere, kind of like getting their head start to jump off the cloud and jump on a horse and come down with a sword and save us. This is absolute fantasy. You learn this from Lord of the Rings. You learn this from when Aragorn goes and gets his ghost army and comes up and saves the day, right? I don't think anyone really loves that part of the movie because it's the God and the machine. It's this idea that all the work that all of them did, it's like the eagles that bring Frodo home after going to Mordor. There's these two like high quality inconsistencies in the storytelling, at least in the film, that tell us we could have just done that from the beginning. And that it wasn't really the strength of men, as they often say in the movie and the books, the strength of men, which will hold up the realm. It's good to see all of you too. Thank you for all the wonderful comments. So it makes the story weaker. It would also make the story weaker in real life. If no matter what, it didn't matter what we actually did, that there's some God or Christ or alien just sitting on the edge in the sky somewhere. It's like, not yet. They have to suffer a little more to understand. The final test, the final exam is almost here. Then we'll jump down and it'll all make sense. You realize if we lived in that reality where there was a God coming to save us or an alien coming, they would be psychopathic narcissists because they allowed us to go through so much suffering so that they could be looked at as a greater hero. If we were living in that world, we would be living in a tyrannical one, a very scary one. Okay? So even if that was true, I would actually have a disdain for whoever the gods were. I would have contempt for that God because that God is messing with my head. That God is allowing for millions, if not billions of people over the course of thousands of years to be unalived unjustly, to be tortured unjustly. We don't want to live in that world anyway, but don't worry, it doesn't exist. Unfortunately, there are billions of people on the planet right now that think it exists. Okay? It's terrifying. Exactly. It sounds more like the devil, the Abrahamic God. Exactly. Now, understand that our ire shouldn't be with an actual Abrahamic deity. Our ire should be with the Catholic Church and with the Pharisees, who concocted this crazy story to keep all of you in your place, who burned the witches at the stake so none of you would practice magic, which is your God, your real God-given right. Moses in Exodus 3:14, he's talking to the real God. Okay, now this is a piece of esoteric wisdom that was left in the Bible. Something that kind of boggles my mind actually is that there are things in the Bible that I'm like, how did this get left in here if they rewrote the whole thing for control? But there's a couple beautiful truths that were left in there, maybe because they thought no one would understand them. When Moses says to God, is like, God says, hey, go to the Hebrews or people, you'll be their leader. Moses says, who shall I say sent to me? And he says, now it's been completely mistranslated. Some people say it's I am that I am. Some people are really confused and they think he's saying Yahweh as an actual name of an actual being. But what he's really saying is, I will become what the Israelites need me to become. More fundamentally, what God is saying in that, which it's more like a Socratic metaphorical story or parable. And what he's saying is, I will become what people need me to become. What is he saying that he is? He's saying he's the creative potential of reality, which can be stabilized into what's called principalities. Yeah, I am that I am is a loose translation. Yes, exactly. Now we're dealing the Tao and the Tao, the flow, the way, the very nature of our creation. And there's a conscious quality to it, which brings us into this idea of principalities, powers, principalities, and wickedness in high places, and goodness in high places, by the way, right? A power is like the evil eye. I'm not trying to blow myself up right now, or gas myself up. Everything I'm about to tell you is incredibly, critically important to you understanding how reality works. So please, at least keep an open mind for what I'm saying. When they talk about powers, principalities, and wickedness in high places, very close to when they tell you to put on the armor of God. This is what they're saying. A power is like the evil eye. A power is like when you really think negative thoughts about someone and then it affects them physically. I don't have to go into all the research. I don't have to go into all the research about how our thoughts actually can affect physical reality, or how plants can pick up on relatives being hurt or being nurtured electromagnetically. Yeah, we don't have to go into all that. I mean, if you're interested, do the research on the stuff because it's real. There's such a large volume of data, evidence, proven experiments that show there is some sort of invisible ether between us that can allow us to connect and communicate in unforeseen ways. So a power can be good or bad when you pray for someone, right? When you know who's going to be calling you before the phone rings. These are powers. These are lesser powers of our spiritual abilities. A principality is a stabilized, at least semi or pseudo conscious spiritual creation by our thought forms, i.e., tulpas, egregores. These are principalities. When the prince of Persia accosts one of the angels, I think it's Gabriel, they're not talking about the physical prince. They're not talking about a physical man fighting an angel. They're talking about the principality of Persia, which is an actual culmination of every Persian person's beliefs and thoughts and their relationship with their culture and their deities, basically their spiritual comic book characters collectivized into an actual being, which works throughout for the people of Persia based on the actual physical borders, because those are the borders they believe in. So if you're interested in tulpas, egregores, look into it. I highly advise it. Now, this is the same thing as a poltergeist. If you look into Carl Jung's work, when he talks about people going through individuation, when they're getting rid of their ego, many times poltergeistic paranormal activity will occur in the house. Cupboards opening and closing, door slamming, sounds like someone's walking in their house when they're not. This is your emotional energy, the potential energy of like stored emotion and intellect, outwardly exploding into spiritual energy, a real energy. Now, like, there's not a great science on this because science is scientism. Most scientists that even get put on television are all goofballs that are basically gatekeepers for the truth. So they're not going to investigate this stuff. The reason they refuse to investigate is not because they think it's ludicrous, because if they investigate it, they'll find out some of this is true. These are principalities. Wickedness and goodness, which they left out goodness, in high places is the super tulpa. So the devil in this respect, right? Because the devil, Satan, Lucifer have many different meanings that have nothing to do with what we are programmed to think it is. Wickedness in high places is like an ultimate wickedness, which is like the culmination of all of our wickedness. But there's also good in high places, which is the culmination of all our hopes, dreams, and desires for what is good. Okay? This is the big secret. So when God tells Moses, I will become what you need me to become, he's giving him the divine mystery of spiritual creation. It's why they say Jerusalem was built in the invisible world first. That's why they say that Solomon's temple was not built with hammer and chisel. It was built up here first. And the invisible world is all around us. The reason they built the pyramids the way they did isn't just for the physical structure. It's because the angles and connections to the electromagnetic field and the actual shape of the pyramid emits certain radiations from the invisible world. Okay? And we're not going to go too deep into the quantum physics of this. I have made a couple videos explaining my beliefs on expansion and collapse being the two fundamental forces, and electromagnetism and gravity, and then strong and weak nuclear force, just being versions of this this more fundamental, which is basically what in Zoroastrianism, when they talk about Agramon and Ahura Mazda, the force of good and evil in the world, is actually just a force of expansion and collapse, which allows for the organization of ideas, objects, heavenly bodies over the course of progress and process of reality. Now, when you're building these structures, whether they're mental structures, prayers, incantations, or physical structures, or sigils on paper, you are actually pulling in higher dimensional energies into an organized form. That's why they say the sigils with the lines move the daemons through them like an electrical energy. And the reason you use a dream catcher is because the daemons get caught in the dream catcher and they bounce around the strings. I mean, this stuff, maybe it sounds like fantasy ridiculousness, but if you follow the lines of logic and everything they've explained about this, it makes perfect sense. So when we develop physical objects, when we make sounds, they have radiations that we can't even begin to contemplate because we as a public society have not been able to venture into those things. The breakaway civilization does understand this stuff. I always say this: Christians pray, the black magicians pray harder. That's why the black magicians are in control, because they've got all you afraid of magic. Many people call magic the devil. My audience doesn't call magic is the devil, but I'm hoping to reach more people today. They have spent 2,000 years destroying pagan sites, building Catholic churches over them, giving you a story that Christ was a God who became man instead of a man who became like the gods. And that he was crucified for your sins, and not that he died because he was assassinated as a political dissident. Understand, they've spent 2,000 years trying to pull you away from the fact that you can literally sit here right now, take a few deep breaths, and actually change reality through actual magic. Yes, magic is real. Okay, so this is where good comes in and where good has a sort of advantage. Good only has an advantage in a community. Good only has the advantage when people work together. The evil person as an individual will be highly successful, especially when he bankrupts the foundations of morality in our society, because then no one will judge the evil person. Notice we could write a laundry list right now of all the bad people doing bad things right now, objectively. And that's what we'll discuss next is what is objectively good. Because there is an objective good. So it really blows my mind when I see people arguing about what good and evil is. It's actually pretty obvious, and we're going to break down what actual objective good is for human beings. And even in a larger, less relative scale of reality itself. We can make a laundry list of all the bad people doing objectively bad things right now that need to be either held accountable in a court of law or removed from their position, et cetera, et cetera. Except what do? What's the new thing it's not new, but it's had a resurgence? Blaming the boomer generation, the baby boomers. You know, in 50 years, we keep doing this. It's going to be the millennials. It's going to be Generation Z. It's going to be Generation X. It's going to be every new generation will just keep blaming the entire generation. It's not the boomers that did anything. It makes me so sad. I don't really have any contact with any of my family, although my heart still goes out to my grandparents as they have to watch TV and the internet and be blamed for everything when they know that just like today, it was specific individual people that wrecked the world. It wasn't an entire generation. It's pathetic. It's the same thing as it's all men, it's all women, it's all the straights, it's all the gays, it's whatever. Everyone has it. Now, here's an interesting thing. Besides the fact that it's just, like I said, the breakdown of logic and morality in our society, it's also what's called group affinity, which is a mammalian survival technique. Before we have the neocortex, that third brain, the new brain, we have the mammalian brain. And now the mammalian brain, what was happening is after the amygdala and all that, after, the lizards, we started to develop the mammalian brain. Lizards are very isolated creatures. They don't really work in groups, right? They're very antisocial, we might say. But as we developed into mammals, see, the entire evolution up to us is increased adaptability and survival and being fit for the environment. Now, there are some things that are evergreen fitness, okay? And what we see in our culmination of what we are is an evergreen, many qualities of evergreen fitness, and most of those being psychological, because psychological evolution is actually far more profoundly powerful than physical evolution once you get the opposing thumb, because then you can create. Once you get the ability to speak language, this is why we're the apex species on the planet. It's not because we're of our physicality. It's only that our physicality, like the larger heads now, the fact that our facial features are getting smaller and the brain's getting bigger, this is the culmination. The fact that we're bipedal, so that we can work with our hands instead of just using them to run. Okay, so one of the most powerful and important psychological sort of evolutions of creatures, species on the planet was something called group affinity. Group affinity is what caused mammals to start working in groups. How they did this was familial mostly, but not always familial. Okay, it could be shared territory, and it could even be something like actual shared culture, which we know is happening now with orca whales and elephants. Orca whales right now are developing their own colloquial languages, which means the orca whales in maybe like the Northern Pacific have slightly different tones and modulations in their language than, let's say, orca whales in South Africa, if there's orca whales there. Now, this is the beginning of culture, because culture is its foundations is on language, because you can't communicate about culture without language, and therefore culture couldn't be culture. It would just be your individual inclinations. So the group affinity thing, what it does is that it causes you to find relation in other individuals in a way that creates a tight-knit group where you operate almost autonomously for the group in a way that you see all other individuals in the group as a second self, as someone that you look after just as much as you look after yourself. And so what happens is you create this tight-knit group, and that's good for survival, right? Because it's not just one person fending for themselves, it's a mob, right? And so if a couple hyenas come to harass one lion, you've seen those videos, the lion doesn't do too hot. They might survive, but they're going to go away with a lot of bruises and such. But if hyenas try to attack a pride, they're going down. And so it was actually really important for survival. Now, the negative side to this for mammals at that time was the groups would war against each other. So now you have these sort of collective individuals warring with each other for territory, for food. The neocortex allowed us to evolve farther from that, where we identify our entire species as the group, except we have not evolved psychologically and philosophically that far. Although there's been brilliant philosophers who individually discovered this, it hasn't caught on yet. Okay? So when we say it's the boomers, when we say it's this gender, it's this sexuality, it's this skin color, oh, because of what they did 50 years ago, or what they do now, or et cetera, all this nonsense, that's actually biological programming from our mammalian brain, which doesn't get processed correctly by the neocortex. And that's why people say stupid things like it's the boomer generation. It's white people, it's black people, it's straight people, it's women, it's men, it's gay, whatever. So we have the tools now to evolve this, but the issue isn't just that we struggle as individuals to make these new connections in the neocortex, literal synaptic connections to think new thoughts, higher thoughts, neocortex thoughts. So, a lot of us are locked even into the reptilian brain as a fear response, but many people don't realize that many people are locked in the mammalian brain, which is also destructive in many ways. Our biggest problem is that we are animals becoming human beings, or animals becoming gods, or animals becoming something higher, and we're struggling with that. There's a great I believe it's an Audio Slave song, nails in my hand for my creator. You gave me life. Now show me how to live. So we create this anthropomorphized character of God to teach us the way, when the way is within us, but the way is difficult and we have to work through it. We're all waiting for a book. We're all waiting for a person, a prophet. We're all waiting for a God. We're waiting for these aliens, when all the answers are within us. We just haven't gotten to them yet. We have to work out all of these idiosyncrasies that are maladaptive to ourselves and to the species. What's the problem? The problem is that there is a nefarious force which wishes to suppress our ability to do that. What is that nefarious force? I'm not positive. But I know when I look at the television and I'm watching a political debate between two folks who are 70 plus years old, who can't even form sentences properly, telling us that they're the most fit people to run an entire country, the most powerful country in human history, as far as we know. I know that's fake. I know that's WWE. I know that's the theatrical world that they're placing in front of us because they are operating in a completely different way with a completely different world. Our knowledge, our growth, our use of the neocortex is our liberation from whatever system seems to be profiting off of our stupidity and ignorance. That should be pretty obvious to people at this point. It's not a matter of incompetency. Joe Biden isn't the epitome of our incompetency politically. Joe Biden is the epitome of kayfabe theater, fake reality, because they are so unbothered and non-worried about us catching on that that's not even real. We think that's incompetency. It's not incompetency. That's maliciousness. That's a complete disregard and an insult to the intelligence of human beings. Yeah, it's blatant. It's obvious. The reason it's obvious is because there's actually a large percentage of the people that think Joe Biden is real. I don't mean like he's not a human being. I mean, Joe Biden is a cultural construct. He's a cultural object, a fake, a dishonest object. He's not a person being the president. He's a person who is playing the character of a president of a collapsing empire. Whether or not the empire is actually collapsing is I don't think that's the case. I think there's three Americas. I think there's the human beings, the American citizens who live in America. I think there's the kayfabe theater, which is Capitol Hill, and I think there's the military-industrial complex and the oligarchic powers of businesses that actually run the country, that actually are America. There's no political America that's real. You haven't voted for a president since the 60s. We all know what happened to that president. And we all know the things that president was trying to do. He was trying to do the actually objectively good things to rid the evil from the world. Clandestine organizations. Influence of foreign countries that we're not even allowed to talk about because there's laws against it. As far as I'll go about that. RFK is also a joke. I want to really drive this home. It's not real. You have to understand the power structure. You have to understand what happened in the late 1800s and the early 1900s and the mid 1900s. There was a breakaway civilization. There was a breakaway civilization. It probably happened about the end of the 1800s. Please look into the airship mystery of 1896 to 1897. Please look into it. Please look into who was funding the Nazi Bell experiments with electrogravitic propulsion and mercury thorium centrifuges, which would basically render gravity inert in a given area and would have effects on time and space. and vortex physics. They already broke physics. They're not using physics anymore. They're not using quantum physics anymore. They're on a science that is incomprehensible to regular society. All of politics is theater. They always, what they do is they already know who's going to be president. And they always create a figure that makes you feel hopeful. After the neocon decimation of the Middle East, the corruption, the lies of George Bush and Dick Cheney and George Bush Sr., people were pretty much tired of old white rich guys carving up the world like a mixture of Monopoly and Risk games. So who did we get? We got the opposite of that. We got an African-American guy from humble beginnings, a community organizer, real down to earth, way better speaker than George Bush. And we were tricked to hoping again. Then what happened? That's when all of a sudden racism's worse than it ever has been. It's not like normal, like when you progress through things like get better over time. No, all of a sudden it's so much worse now. Obama ended up being just like Bush. He ended up doing more, drone strikes, et cetera, et cetera. So then we were sick of that. So what did people want? They wanted a return to normal. And what did they get? They got to make America great again. Right? And then again, understand that while the president is working whatever magic they're supposed to be working, whether they're doing it inadvertently, I'm not saying Obama is necessarily a monster. He is now. But maybe when he went into this, he was actually a decent dude that didn't know about this. Maybe he was hopeful. Now, the same thing. Chance, I recommend some chamomile tea or something to calm down. I mean, I don't know if you've been listening, but I just said that us hating on groups is the wrong way. And so as long as there's consent, I mean, kiss whoever you want as long as they want to be kissed. Like no one cares, no one's upset about that. What's most important is that we love each other. And so if that's the way you love, that's incredible. That's great. I'm happy for you. I think they're just a troll. I'm not even sure they mean any of this. They've been posting the rainbow flag for about 20 minutes now. And no one's had a problem with it. I think they're just trying to make it so other people's comments can't make it through. Anyway, so they're probably, either an automated bot troll or they're working for some troll farm, whatever it is, right? Or maybe they have a little bit of possession in them. Anyway, so yeah, I'll block them just because they won't stop doing it. I'm not sure what's going on with them, but what are you gonna do, folks? We can't even know if that person is real. Yeah, I blocked them. Now understand that there's something that happens on my TikTok that's quite weird. It used to happen a lot. It was almost supernatural. I would block people and then it wouldn't work. And then they tell me that they knew I was trying to block them without me saying that I was, and that I couldn't or something like that. But hopefully it'll work now, because back in the day, people would I blocked the account, wouldn't do anything, and then they'd mock me for not being able to block them. So I don't know if they were like TikTok engineers or if they were, I don't know, clandestine, but it was really weird. Anyway, let's get back to the subject. So understand, when Trump came into office, right? What happened when Trump announced, right? Okay, so basically the public temperature on Trump was either you don't really care one way or the other about him, or you loved him. He was on WWE and he'd go on all the talk shows. And the only thing you thought when you thought Trump before he announced his candidacy was, oh, the apprentice guy, oh, the guy that goes on the wrestling, oh, you know, the real estate guy from New York. Trump was largely loved. It seemed like within a day or a week of him announcing his candidacy, the half the world hated him. But literally nothing had changed except he announced his candidacy, and a bunch of news agencies told everyone to hate him. To me, what this is the culmination of the MK Ultra project. Somehow they learned how to flip a switch on in people's brains on a mass scale. They weren't just doing it to individuals in psych wards or to Charlie Manson or whatever. They were able to turn a switch on in millions of people like that. Okay? Trump, again, just a cultural object. He's not a real president. Okay? Yeah. So I made, thanks, Conscious Corey. I did block them. So then, I won't say too much on this because I always get in trouble for this, which probably means that it's true. There was a week where Trump wasn't feeling too good, and he kind of disappeared from the public eye. And then there was a strange video that he released that where he didn't have any of his regular mannerisms, and it didn't even sound like his voice, and it didn't even really look like him. It looked a little fake. And then he came back and he was telling everyone to get the poke. Do with that information what you will. But after that happened, he changed completely. Just a side example, because this theater goes across everything. Jordan Peterson was giving tons of great advice to young people. He was totally sound. Everyone, well, not everyone. The media, the population hated him. The real ones understood he was giving great advice. He gets sick, goes to Russia, comes back, and now he's a propagandist. What's happening? George Clooney, Jon Stewart, Dave Chappelle, all these people are saying Biden will save democracy. These aren't stupid people. Biden can barely function. None of this is real. And then, I don't want to get too much into pop culture, but these are blood traitors to the human race. It's not about Democrat and Republican. I'm not saying I'm mad because they're liberal. I'm mad because they're telling you that a person who belongs in a nursing home should be the president. And they are not stupid. They are well aware, which means there's a reason they're doing it. Probably because half of them were on Epstein Island. And the other half, it's in their freaking contract. Because above being actors and comedians and entertainers, they are propagandists for the government. Blood traitors to the whole human race. When I say blood traitor, what I mean is like your blood runs human and you are doing things that are inhumane that will lead to the destruction of human beings. So yeah, it's what I'm trying to get across here is that this is all theater. What is it theater for? The fact that they already broke quantum physics and can do basically anything and reform reality. The fact that magic is real and with intention and prayer, especially collective prayer, when two or more pray in my name, I am there, that magic is real. Okay? What we're dealing with is the technological, the intellectual, the emotional and spiritual philosopher's stones, which would liberate every human being on this planet. So instead, they create a chaotic plot and convince you that it's real so that you never exercise your ability to perform spiritual miracles, actual real miracles, which can make your life better and the lives of others better, and would make it so, and to explore technology and science in such a way that you could build a motor that runs on water right? And then liberate yourself from being dependent upon governments and organizations and companies. Okay? That's what this is all about. It's to control and try to stop the technological, philosophical, and spiritual revolution that will bring us to a kingdom of heaven where all people would be made equal immediately. There is a breakaway civilization that uses electrogravitic propulsion and flies flying saucers and tells you that they're aliens because they don't want you to know it's them in those ships, that they can do whatever the hell they want, that they have basically the epitome of a flying house. Okay? And then there are several runs under it, and everyone's trying to get to the top, and et cetera, et cetera. So they lock us into this fake reality where elections are real, and there's actually these social movements that are trying to help groups. It's all not, like, the whole thing is absolute fable. And our participation in it is our participation in the prison system. What we need to think is prison breakout. And we do that by non-participation. We do that by spreading this information to people. People say, well, what do we do about it? So talk about it first. First thing we do is we talk about it more. We make more videos. We do more posts. We have more conversations with people. What's the win for the breakaway civilization? Well, you know, they can't get flying saucers to everyone. That's the way they think about it. There's not enough material. There's not enough air traffic control to give everyone a flying saucer. But what they're not thinking creatively. They're not thinking about the fact that we would work out how we distribute this technology. On the other side of it, they're saying things like, you know, once you crack into the very nature of how reality works and putting together reality from a fundamental state. So for instance, what I'm saying is, look, this is something, another thing, this, if you really contemplate what I'm about to say, you'll understand how powerful this is. For a century now, we've been able to, with the application of various chemicals, turn one molecule into another molecule. And so the molecule is comprised of atoms. So in this compound, it's obviously made of different types of atoms, and we form molecules. We can add chemicals and do all sorts of different processes in the lab, which change one molecule to another molecule. That is not the fundamental basis of what we're capable of. Because underneath molecules, one scale of magnitude, we might say, are atoms. And if we've been able to do this for 100 years or more than that. I mean, yeah, the alchemists were doing this. They just didn't have a microscope to check it for thousands of years. Then it's possible that we take the atom and with a higher science, reform one atom into another atom, right? Then what are we doing? Then I'm taking the constituents of this table that I have before me, and I'm turning it into clean drinking water. You understand what I'm saying? That may sound fantastic in science fiction. It's not, because before they were changing one molecule, you know, with like compound amount of elements into another molecule, you would have thought that was crazy. Yes, the replicator is something that will or is already real. It is only a matter of understanding how to do it. And trust me when I tell you, that's what CERN is. They aren't smashing particles together to smash particles together. They're trying to recreate atoms from using the subatomic building blocks. You understand? That's what they're hiding from us. One of the reasons they're hiding from us, because again, there's lots of greedy people that want power. If you could just make gold, if you took a heavier metal than gold, you would have more outputted gold if you could change that, like lead into gold. That's, now there's metaphorical meanings of the alchemist saying turning lead into gold, but there's also a literal practical pursuit to do that. And yes, we can do that. They already do it with lasers, by the way. It's just more expensive to turn the lead into gold with these high-powered lasers than it's worth in gold that you get. But it doesn't mean that's the final technology to do it. So if you can imagine it, it's possible. It's just a matter of space and time. It's just a matter of the technology and reforming materials to produce a particular phenomenon. Okay? That's what they're hiding. They're hiding the fact that they are light years ahead in technology. The reason string theory is on pause, I've been developing this theory recently, and I came across Jason Reza Giorgiani and his theory that string theory is actually a ruse. It's if you actually read into string theory, it's all theoretical fantasizing. And it hasn't produced any results. And it's gatekept. And if you ask the leader of string theory, Edward Witten, this is something really interesting. This is what I learned from Jason Reza Giorgiani. Edward Witten, if you ask him, is there any possibility that the string theory isn't working and there's something else? He says, there is nothing but string theory. That's coming from the mouth of a scientist. Even though it hasn't worked for 5 decades, there is absolutely nothing else we should investigate besides continuing to push a bad theory that hasn't pushed any results. And this is referred to as like one of the smartest men on the planet. He is, in my opinion, an asset. His father worked on electrogravitic propulsion. His father was connected to all these companies and these research technologies that were not doing string theory. They were doing quantum gravity. They were doing vortex physics. And his son just happens to be the person that leads a completely dead theory that blocks us from researching those things. You got to be kidding me. They were told to be quiet, and then they were told to gatekeep. Right? So, understand when I tell you that's the big secret. Before the technology, what they were trying to keep from you was the spiritual power, the understandings of the morphogenetic field, i.e. the invisible world, and how you can consciously affect things. You have psychokinetic, telekinetic powers. You can remote view. You can lucid dream. You can astral project. Gina, this is all going to be on a YouTube as well. Okay. It's all about hiding the truth. Those 2 truths that I have told you. Start spending some time researching this stuff. Electrogravitic propulsion. How IBM, JP Morgan, and many other people were not only funding the Nazis, but they were also funding an Anglo-Saxon movement which occurred before the Nazis. And the Nazis are probably actually just a culmination of this work that was being done beforehand. Okay? Now, what do human beings need to do? We need to get our shit together. So let's talk about the nature of good and evil real quick. And then I'm just going to let it be questions for the rest, because I think we've done a really good job covering this. I can't believe we got all that done in an hour. What is righteousness? What is good? Exactly. Well, yeah, Jason, so what we've used as good is a construct. But what's actually good? An objective way that would help everyone. I love to use love as the example, Caitlin. We're going to use love as the example in about 3 minutes when I explain something. Righteousness, as it's like Hebrew etymology from the very beginning, is so sinning is to use your energy inefficiently, which turns to missing the mark, which is a reference to not hitting the bullseye when you're doing archery. So it's imperfect action, stating that there is a best way to do something, which attaches to the ideas of the Tao, the way. There is a way that you're, like as Terence McKenna said, there is a way that you're supposed to hold a teacup because all your ancestors held it that way, and your muscle structure through evolution and through passing down genes makes it so that there's a most conducive way for you to hold a mug. That's actually an aspect of righteousness. Perfect, efficient, effective, and ethical movement. Thank you. So now, how does this tie into good and evil as we see it? Well, do you think we're very effective, efficient, and ethical right now in our society? Absolutely not is the only answer. We are in dire straits in most of the world. It's not just happening in one place or another. It's falling apart. The human world is falling apart. It's because we're not righteous. That's two things. There is no objective good for all of reality. Or maybe there is, but we haven't discovered it. It's not an anthropomorphized God of good that looks after human beings more than he looks after the beetles. If there was a God, the God would probably be a God of beetles, because there's more variation of beetle species. Terence McKenna says this again, and they're more diverse, and they will survive the nuclear holocaust. So if God loves any creature more, he probably loves the beetles more, or the cockroaches, right? I think the cockroach is, technically a beetle. So there's no objective good of a God, and it's directly related to human beings and their good. So all we can concern ourselves with is the good of people. What is the good of people? 4 things: no lying, no cheating, no stealing, no killing. These are the 4 fundamental sins or violations against human nature. Why? Because it's the Tao of the species. We don't like being lied to. We don't like being stolen from. We don't like being cheated. And we don't like being physically hurt to the point of, expiration. Because we don't like those things ourselves, those are fundamental and objective human qualities. Unless the person is severely mentally ill, they might like one of those things, but it's because they're highly disturbed, and we can also objectively measure that. Because we don't like those 4 things happening to us, it means that nobody else does. And if we don't like it happening to us, we shouldn't make it happen to other people. Those are the 4 divine laws against sin. It's very simple. Now, obviously, there's striations off of that, because people might say, well, they're psychologically harming me. But then you have to say, okay, what's the psychological harm? Well, I asked him, am I overweight? Do you think I'm overweight? And he said, yeah. And I think he's trying to be mean to me. And they're like, well, let's look at your BMI. And let's put you on the scale, and we'll tell you if maybe objectively you could lose a couple pounds and be healthier. Right? So everything will still have checks and balances, because there's also people that are extremely psychologically abusive and do terrible things. But there's a way for us to understand and measure those things and investigate those things. And we need to have a collective desire to defend the good and enforce the good. Back in the day, when somebody in the village would steal from somebody, they would strap them to a pole for a week, and put like a sign on them that says, thief. Public embarrassment. But once that week was over, or however long they did it for, and they kept them fed, and they didn't, they didn't commit a higher sin against their sin, they would reaccept the person back into the community if they came to Jesus, sort of sense, that they admitted that they were wrong, and they explained how they were going to be better. They'd be on watch, they'd be on sus, right? But they would be given another chance. See, justice is very simple. We've overcomplicated it to the point that you've got to call a lawyer if your neighbor builds a fence that's 4 inches over from what you believe to be the territory line, because people can't just work with each other. Neighbor starts laying out the lines, and the other neighbor's like, hey, so technically this is my spot. You know, how does that become a situation where you have to go to civil court? There's obviously the objective line where it is. Wherever that is, they have to investigate together. So two neighbors should be able to conversate and say, oh yeah, you're right, this is where the line actually is, or here's the actual dimensions of the house. Okay, let's measure it together. Yeah, that's fine. I totally understand where you're coming from. Even those 4 inches can be helpful if you have a garden, da 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 da. These should be able to be things we work out amongst ourselves. That's another thing, is we've lost the ability to communicate effectively and righteously. Because we're so confused on these fundamental principles of good, we have a really hard time parsing out evil in the world. Like I said before, we could make a laundry list of the evil people objectively doing evil things in the world based on those 4 things: lying, cheating, killing, stealing. BG, his initials, is over there stealing India. It's obvious. It's obvious he's trying to steal India. Him and MZ, who runs one of those social media companies. I don't want to say too much because they've literally gone in my DMs as I was talking about these people and deleted messages I was sending to people in DMs on TikTok, and then telling me I'm not allowed to talk about that person. So I won't, but you guys know who I'm talking about, right? And then we as a collective need to make demands that these people be removed from offices, that these people be brought to court, that these people be removed from being able to do business in particular countries where they're basically cannibalizing the country, cannibalizing the Commonwealth. We need to act. And first, like I said, as individuals, because we're not organized. And the world has fallen into a real destitution as far as righteousness and morality is concerned. We have to just speak up. And yes, it's difficult. And yes, like, it's exhausting. As someone said earlier, I look exhausted. I do. I am exhausted. I'm exhausted by all this. But what other alternative do we have? Keep calm and carry on. Light wins in the end. God's going to save us. This is all nonsense. We need to be active, even if we're just active with our speech. We need to be active in the world, even if it's just standing against tyranny. When there was all that police brutality, every time I saw it, I was shocked. I was like, why is that the 10 people filming this? Why aren't the 10 people approaching the officer tempered, like, not erratically? Someone puts the hand over the taser and the other thing, a citizen, and tells the cop, you need to leave. Who's your commanding officer? There's 10 of us here. 5 of them get in front of the person that's being assailed and assaulted. 2 or 3 people put their hands on the shoulders of the officer who's committing the crime. 2 people put their hands over their lethal devices, just over them, not taking them, over them so they can't grab them. And they tell that cop, it's time to stop. We have you on film. We're going to contact the police station. We're going to talk to your commanding officer, and you're probably going to be suspended for this. We cannot allow you to beat on this person anymore. It didn't happen once, but there was 1,000 videos on World Star Hip Hop and TMZ and all these places. Why? This isn't to gas me up. I'm not telling this story so you guys be like, oh, he's so cool, he's so brave. When I was younger, I was at a bar and I was walking out, we had this like cool, it's called Barrack Street. And it's just like a cool line of bars, right? And it's where everyone went on Thursdays during the summer. So I'm walking down and I see a guy out of nowhere sucker punch another guy just to be a jerk. That guy gets sucker punched, goes after the guy who sucker punched him. At that moment is when the cops turn around, and what they see is the guy who was punched first going after this other guy. So they immediately engage the guy who was sucker punched. And I was explained to the cop, it wasn't him, it was that guy who punched him. And the cops, at least in my city, a lot of them were really ignorant and arrogant. So they just were talking over me as I'm trying to explain, no, he punched him. And rightfully he's mad. So he keeps trying to talk over me. And then he's trying to basically arrest this guy. And so I literally get right in front of the guy and I say, look, man, he didn't do anything wrong. And at that point, the cop threatened to arrest me. And so I turned to the guy and I said, look, I know what just happened to you was messed up. I know you didn't do anything wrong. This guy's not going to listen. It's best that you just walk away. And I stood between them and that guy walked away. He still got sucker punched. There's nothing we could do about that. And that guy got away with it, the other guy. But at least he didn't go to jail, which would have made his night even worse. Someone said they can understand why people are afraid. Sure. Lots of things are scary, especially when the world is run by lunatics. They're going to make it as scary as possible for you to do the right thing. But it doesn't mean we don't do it. I'm not asking you to be a martyr. I'm asking you, how brave are you? What is the extent of your courage? And if you could be a hero for the day for the world, what would that look like? And if there was 10 people on that corner when that certain individual is being brutalized by 2 police officers, could the 10 of you non-violently de-escalate the situation? The answer is yes. Yes, absolutely. Even two cops are not going to unalive 10 people who are peacefully getting in the way. And if they are willing to arrest 10, then you bring 20 next time. And you bring so many that they can't fill the local police station. Do you understand that they don't have the capacity to stop us all? And I'm talking about nonviolent, peaceful action. Getting in the way of police brutality can be nonviolent and peaceful. The issue is that most of us pull out our phones. Sure, keep one person filming it, but be organized. One person films it for evidence, and the other 9, 15 people on the corner get in front, get in the middle, and de-escalate the situation. You have so much more power than they do. And now take that and extrapolate that to everything. Soldiers. There wouldn't be any war if the soldiers just didn't go. Even in this situation you're hearing about in Ukraine and Russia, where they're like snatching people off the corners, someone still has to pull the trigger. Someone still has to push a button. Even if they're in some underground facility and they're operating drones, they still have to use the joysticks. Not for long. When they start programming these robots to do it for us, that's why this is so important for this to happen now. Because there's going to be a point where they don't need us to wage war. And that's coming really soon. And so we need to stop it now. Every application, the Federal Reserve, the IRS, we need to get together and start calling each other and saying, hey, how are we going to dismantle the Federal Reserve? Here's something. Thomas Massey. Look, Thomas Massey was trying to put a resolution through that would end the Federal Reserve. His wife just passed away unexpectedly. Some may see that as a deterrent to do the right thing. I see it as even more of a reason to do the right thing. Because these people are sinister and evil. I'm not saying that necessarily that was anything foul play, but it sure looks suspicious. In fact, it always looks suspicious. Whenever these people get unalived, they just happen to be, coming up against the greatest powers of evil in the world. We have to have an effect. We have to work together. And it comes in small things like this, like peacefully. It doesn't mean ACAB. It doesn't mean that we look at them as all enemies. we do look at them and we judge them for each individual action that they take. So it's not this hatred against police. It's making sure that they keep their shit tight. Ain't nothing wrong with that. We are the employers. That's another thing. Understand what your relationship with is to the sovereign state. Screw all these people that say that the state is the sovereign. The state isn't the sovereign. The state is half the sovereign in a agreement and relationship with its citizens, which are also sovereign through its power to maintain its territory. And there are things in trade. So when I say sovereign, question and answer is coming right after this. So I'm just going to do this last bit and then we'll do some Q&A. When a sovereign coercive power, i.e. a state, invites people to be a part of their territory, basically accepts citizenry, the state is offering protection, security, and potentially other things like, 3 meals a day, whatever. In return, the citizens become sort of homogenized and absorbed into the state and become operative for the state, whether that's in creating industry, fighting wars when necessary, et cetera, et cetera. But when one side doesn't hold up the deal, the other side doesn't have to keep up their end. And the things that were promised to us in the US Constitution are not being given to us anymore. Therefore, we do not have to hold up our end of the deal. They are being employed to provide security and well-being, liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They have basically taken all those things away from us through their policies and through the changing of laws and through the abuse of power and through taxation without representation. We all know that we're not being represented and we need to be represented. It doesn't matter that we fake vote for politicians. They are not representing our interest anymore. We scream and rail at them for all the public goods and their degradation, for all the things that they need to do that they're not doing in this country. And they continue to send their money wherever they want. And they continue to manipulate the money so that they can make money on trading and whatever it is, or fund some war that gives them an advantage or whatever, or unaliving 500,000 Iraqis, right? The contract is null and void. And there's a way that we do this without creating chaos in the country. Okay? Something to think about. Understand what God is. The hyperdimensional geometric lattice of creation, tetragrammaton, YHVH. I will become what you need me to become. You are a magician. In the very literal sense of the word. Think and you create. Understand that the uncertainty principle, 0-point energy, the collapse and expansion, accretion, all of these things will help you to understand the true nature of this reality, which is not unlike a dream. When you lucid dream, you can imagine something and it appears in the dream. Understand that the same thing can happen in here. It's only our lack of understanding or belief that it's possible that it can't exist. Okay, so questions and answers. Let's get into it. I think that we did a pretty good hour. It felt like 2 hours. Not in a bad way, just covered quite a bit. Yeah, question and answer. Thank you everyone for being here. Let me see. Hey Jackie, how you doing? Hope you're still here and I didn't miss you. Jubilee. I need a little history lesson on Jubilee. I believe it's something to do with the Torah or something. Any questions? It can be relevant to what we're talking about or just freestyle it. All of righteousness isn't self-righteousness, because righteousness actually, we're talking about the relationship between people. And so there's also a collectively righteous way. Doesn't mean we're all going to agree on everything all the time. It just means that there's fundamental things that we need to agree on that are supportive to our human nature and the progression of collective human collectivism, i.e., civilization and society. Patrick, what do you mean? What do I call myself besides my nicknames and my name? It's just, it has to be a drastic transformation, in what government is. Patrick, I need you to stay on track here. You asked me a question. I asked you to clarify the question. I did. It did not make it any more clear to ask me a different question. Does 1 + 1 = 2? Or multiple? Does 1 × 1 = 2? Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit. Actually, I want to riff on Terrence Howard, Eric Weinstein, and 1 × 1 = 2. Not for a long time. Patrick, it's only annoying. It's only annoying. Don't do that. Just talk. Just don't talk like you're some esoteric sage who knows so many things. Just have a conversation. You're not going to be able to lord over me, especially when you write things like sigh. Just drop the act and just be a human being. Okay, so 1 × 1 = 2. Real quick, I know I've talked a lot about this. I won't go far into it, okay? I don't think 1 × 1 = 2. I don't think 1 × 1 = anything. Let me explain. When God said, be fruitful and multiply, it's not going to be a religious version of multiplication. But when a man and a woman come together and make a kid, they've multiplied, right? Well, then 1 × 1 = 3. Okay? And now when you use multiplication on a piece of paper, 1 × 1 = 1 because it's 1, 1. I get that. I'm not saying that 1 × 1 = 2. I'm telling you 1 × 1 doesn't mean anything. It only means what we want it to believe to mean. Do you understand what I'm saying? Here's another great example. When I said Terrence Howard was right, most people didn't understand. They thought I said he was right about 1 × 1 = 2. That's not what I said. And I never said that. Here's what he was right about. In mathematics, on paper, you have things called imaginary numbers. I believe the fundamental one everyone remembers is the square root of -1. The square root of -1 is an imaginary number in mathematics. Okay? And it also doesn't exist in real life. But there are real numbers like -1, -2, -3, and 0, which are real numbers in mathematics. But guess what? They're not real in reality. Show me -1 in reality. There's no such thing. It's not real. Terrence Howard, whether he does think that 1 × 1, and by the way, it's not just him saying 1 × 1 = 2. He's got a whole proof where he exploits a inconsistency with mathematical thinking where they had to make an exceptionary rule for 1 × 1 because it doesn't fit the same parameters for the inverse function of it as all the other numbers do. What Terrence Howard is doing is exposing the inconsistencies with mathematical ideas and how their abstractness doesn't work in physical reality. Therefore, the math and science isn't a perfect application and there's evolutions we should make. That's what Terrence was actually saying. Negative integers don't exist in our reality. We keep operating in a fantasy world in science and mathematics. And that's why nothing's getting done. Here's another mind blower that you might not be able to appreciate, but hopefully you do. There is no such thing as 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. It is not real. 3 dimensions, -1 is real as a written number on a piece of paper. -1 in physical reality is not real. It can't exist. It's impossible. In a process explained with mathematical syntax, you can say that me eating an orange is -1 orange. Or if I do a chemical process that renders the effects of a particular other chemical inert, then we can label the chemical effect as a number value of 1 and the process of making it inert -1. But it's not actually that -1 exists in reality. It's that we're using a mathematical syntax to explain a process that could be explained 1,000 other ways. -1 doesn't exist as a real thing in reality. Neither do 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions is a grid work that we use to make measuring reality easier. It is a map we overlay over the real territory, except the real territory isn't perfectly 3 dimensions. It's not 3 dimensions at all. Show me the dimensions. They can, oh, well, it's this equation. Okay, no, but show me the dimensions in reality, which also creates the confusion that time is a dimension. Time is not a dimension. We are not a 3-dimensional space moving on a linear dimension of time. This is silly. Yeah, and that's where the string theory comes from. There isn't 3 dimensions, let alone 11 or 12 or 21. It's ridiculous. Yeah, time is just a measurement tool. Here's a perfect example. Imagine you've got the universe here. Imagine that you've got the universe here. Well, there isn't only the present because we have videos of history and the past. So the past exists or existed because we have video proof and pictures. We can now prove that the past existed. But the only moment now is the present. But present isn't a thing either. Like, it's just this concept. You can never grab a present moment. There's no, like, unless we want to go like, you know, a Planck length of time, like the smallest measurement of time. Okay, so let's say this is the universe. I understand it's not the actual shape of the universe, but let's say this is. And you've got, yeah, dimensions are fake. It's not, it's mathematical. It's just a way to measure things. It's not that there's 3 dimensions in reality. It's only abstract. But we've got ourselves thinking they're real, which is part of the reason science and mathematics is so screwed up right now, which is the point Terrence Howard was trying to make. Now, in this universe, we have areas of consolidation of matter and energy. By the way, time isn't time, time is process. The only way you measure time is by the movement of matter and energy, which creates force, which is a process and that creates momentum and happens. And we call that time. But there are places, let's say, in the universe that nothing's going on. It's absolute zero. There's no time happening there because time requires a process and something to measure. So therefore, time can't be a dimension because all of space would have to move through it, except that's not what's happening. There are cold pockets where time can't be measured because nothing conscious can be there to measure it. There's no matter and energy there to show that it's happening. There's no matter and energy to observe process. And so therefore time isn't occurring in that space. Therefore it can't be a dimension because if the 3 dimensions of space sort of like move through the dimension of time, I know it's a simplified way of saying it, but if that's the case, then time should be constant everywhere, or at least moving in some process. There's places where time isn't occurring in our universe. Therefore, it's not a dimension. It's a force or an effect. Okay, so that's what Terrence was trying to say. But everyone's quick. Look, why are they talking about him on Piers Morgan? Why did Neil deGrasse Tyson not get back to Terrence, but instead just made a video saying he was wrong? Because they scared him, or he scared them. Not because Terrence just dropped like all the wisdom and everything, but he touched on things that would crack their glass castle, that would shatter their glass castle. So they have to jump on him and make him look stupid. He's not stupid. He's a visionary who's realizing some real inconsistencies, and he's starting a great conversation. And that's why I said about him. I said, Terrence Howard is single-handedly saving the world, not because he had all the answers, because he asked the right questions at the right time on the biggest podcast on the planet. I understand that Terrence is only the beginning of a conversation where we actually talk about vortex physics, about electrogravitic propulsion, and about how we've been getting lied to by science and math, scientists and mathematicians for 5 decades, probably because they're CIA assets who are stopping us from understanding that those flying saucers are probably mostly ours, human beings. So that's my riff. Okay. 1 times 1 doesn't mean anything. It means whatever we believe it believes. It means. There's no 1 times 1 happening in reality. There's meiosis. There's meiosis, you know, the splitting up of cells. There's mitosis, right? There's the audio is going to change on the TikTok for a little bit, guys. I have to charge the phone. There's things, and multiplication is just this word. Most of math right now is broken because we're sitting on these abstract postulates that don't work in reality. Reincarnation, I'm not sold on it. There's some strange stories about like kids being born and they have like the memories of the person before, and they've solved crimes, and I get that. But also I understand that there's a thing called ancestral memory. There's a thing called, you know, what they call the Akashic records, and how you can probably tap into the information of anybody at any time. Not only is there a genetic record keeping, but I think there's some sort of quantum record keeping that we can all tap into. You understand what I'm saying? Lots of people say that they're pharaohs. That, oh, in a past life I was a pharaoh. Well, how many people can be the pharaohs? Or is it the fact that most of us are probably related to the pharaohs, and because all of their experiences were epigenetically layered on their DNA, and that is kept, that is a perfect record keeping of experience for the entire human race, that we might be tapping into our own epigenetic memories that have been layered on our DNA. This is another proven thing. As I'm talking to you right now, the memory that's being created for this moment is also at the same time, there was sort of like this, almost like, imagine like quantum entanglement. The DNA is being written on right now, being coded for this event. Because its memory isn't just here, it's stored in the DNA. And so if I have half of my father's and half my mother's DNA, and then I have 25% each of my grandparents, and then you start extrapolating that out, and great-grandparents, 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 all of a sudden you're related to 1,000 people in only maybe 150 years or 200 years, a little more than that. So let's say 500 years you're related to 1,000 people, and then that just keeps on growing, right? So is it possible that when people think they're having a dream or a memory of the reincarnation, they're actually just having a memory of their ancestor? It's actually much more plausible that they're having memories of their ancestors, because we can actually show where that would make sense based on the science we already have. I'm not saying reincarnation doesn't happen. I just think it'd be a weird and kind of goofy thing for the universe to do, unless this was some sort of really sick trap. So it's possible, but I'm not sold on it. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just, there are other more logical and still cool explanations for these experiences and memories we have. And then there's also this idea that, like, look, you've heard of the remote viewing things. Why was our US government putting millions and millions of dollars into, tens of millions of dollars into remote viewing if it wasn't real? How do you remote view? How is that possible? And they weren't just remote viewing in the present. They were remote viewing things that did happen and things that were going to happen. Could you remote view to 20 years ago, even accidentally, and kind of jump to the perspective of another person, and then you wake up and think that that's your reincarnation? Yeah. If remote viewing is real, and you're able to go into the past and into the future and in the present as well. So there's another explanation that you don't need reincarnation for. Now, the things that support reincarnation, I think the most like the one that stands out the most is that in the Bardos, the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they they talk about how it takes 49 days to go from one life to the next. I think that's interesting because at 49 days of conception, the baby produces a massive amount of DMT, and it's on the 49th day that the baby becomes a male or female. That's an interesting coincidence to me. It doesn't mean it proves it or anything, but it's an interesting coincidence that the same amount of time that the Buddhists said it took for you to go from one life to the next is the same amount of time that the baby essentially incubates before being gendered, and they produce a massive amount of DMT on the 49th day. And I've always thought that the DMT is sort of like a window to a window of the soul to leave and enter. And that's why it happens at near-death experience. That's why it happens in lucid dreaming and all this other kind of stuff. What's the point of like life? I can't explain Walter Russell's periodic table to you any more than it, again, it's re-examining the relationship to these fundamental building blocks of reality to a more harmonic and frequency based instead of like a chemical or weight based. Yeah, and Jen, I think that it adds to the idea that they don't want us to know about this stuff. All right, got another question here. Do I believe in what? In reincarnation? No. I don't think that it's impossible either. I just think, like I said, there's many better explanations for those experiences that people have. You know what I mean? I'm going away more in a psychological sense. Oh, and Walter Russell's periodic table, it's kind of like what Eric Weinstein said. It's like there's no the periodic table. There's just a way that we assemble these fundamental building blocks of reality, and like what are we categorizing them based on? I believe in the Walter Russell table if it makes sense, and and he can show the frequencies and harmonics and vibrations and how each atom operates in their own sort of resonance based on maybe electron spin or the effects of the strong and weak nuclear electromagnetic gravity and the emanations that come off it, and how it actually, because I think Eric Weinstein agreed and he said, yeah, like there's actually the molecules do go like move the same way as the musical scale. If I were to pick flat, holographic, or hollow earth, I'd have to go first with holographic, but I would say holographic universe. And I would say that, like I said, this reality is more akin to a dream than some sort of concrete physical thing that doesn't change. I'm of the belief of Charles Fort, who was probably the first person to pioneer the idea that we're actually organizing reality based on our concepts and beliefs of it. And so the reality sort of condenses and stabilizes into perceived ideas about reality. And so reality used to be looser, and so therefore we had fairies and gnomes and elves back in the day. And I believe that people did have literal experiences with them because they believed it was possible. And because we believe in this material static reality led by Descartes, who also tried to destroy alchemy and hermeticism as a cultural movement, led us to this belief that everything is so static and unmoving, which locks us into a brutalist totalitarian society. And I think all this was done intentionally. And I think that, yeah, I think back in the day, like we could just produce magic, and we saw elves, and elves were real because this is an actual literal dream in that sense. And whatever we believe to be true actually becomes. And so if everyone believed the earth was flat, it might actually flatten the earth. And if everyone believed the earth was a globe, it actually turn it into a globe, is what I think is, as fantastic as that sounds, I think that's what's happening. We all know what happened on 911. Yeah, and so it's something that harkens deep from within us that we know is true. It's why the stories, like, the story of Christ, the story of Harry Potter, all these different stories, that kind of like there's this magic if we face the unfaceable, if we stand up against tyranny, and we get crucified by the truth, that we can reconnect with that magic. I think the reason we keep writing this story is because we all know deep down inside it's true, that reality is in fact a dream and magic is real. The pole shift, it's like I tend to find Edgar Cayce to be pretty credible. I mean, I've done a lot of study on the pole shift stuff, obviously. Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, Ben Davidson. I study all their work, obviously. If you want to understand the pole shift, those are three names among many others. But I mean, Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers is doing the best work, the most important work. That guy is a saint. Now, is it possible that that's also a psyop? Absolutely, it's possible. Is it possible that they'll use that so that they can just wholesale destroy things on the planet because they have weather machines? Absolutely true. Absolutely possible. It's possible that everything is a mindfuck, right? But just to let you know, if it is true, Mount Etna just erupted, and Edgar Cayce said that the pole shift would occur quite soon after Mount Etna and Mount Pelée erupted. And so you got one more volcano to erupt with Mount Pelée, and then maybe just at least consider buying rice and beans in bulk and getting yourself a little survival gear. I'm in the exact place that I'm at now, specifically because if the global catastrophe happens, I'll be in one of the safest places on the planet. I won't go into specific details about where I am, but west of central Arizona and east of Texas. I'm sorry, east of central Arizona and west of Texas. And not too far south and not too far north, although, because you've got Yellowstone above, and then you've got obviously the Gulf below. I want to survive because if there's an opportunity to get to the place that we were supposed to go as a species, not some divine prophecy, just what we were capable of. And there's an opportunity to rebuild on the other side with truth and honesty and love. I want to be there for that. I want to at least help them facilitate the rebuilding of human society with the fundamental tenets that are required for us to not collapse into degradation. That's why I want to. But if I've got to go instead, that's fine too. And if it keeps going like this, I don't want to be here. I have no intention of being a part of, if this, what's happening now, continues to, it's pathetic, it's gross, it's disgusting, it will only lead to a hellish state for all people, no matter who they are. So in that situation, I wouldn't want to. I'd like to find some peace for a few more years before the robot dogs come to get me, or whatever the hell happens if these morons continue to be in power. But yeah, I don't have any intention of being around too much longer if not like I'm going to do anything to myself, just like I'm going to stop trying. If it gets to a point where I think that there's a certain imminence of us going into this 1984 on steroids, like I'll live in a tent and just like try to find peace for however long I can sustain myself in nature before whatever comes to get me. Would be my position. If there's a global catastrophe, I'll try to survive that, and then try to be a positive force for the restructuring and rebuilding of human civilization. And if we have a real good scenario where there's a great overturning, a psychological, emotional, philosophical, and spiritual revolution, the soul and the mind and the heart and we get back to thinking correctly and we enter into an age of reason, well, any one of us will be able to live forever. So, but yeah, like, look, I think a lot of people are still gripping on to like the internet and culture, and like they think there's something salvageable there. There's nothing salvageable. This is a den of sin, the whole thing. I mean, watching any of this stuff can only make you stupider at this point. Participating in the economic system and the political system. Dusty, that's just escapism, friend. It's just escapism. No, there's real awful, terrible things happening in the world right now. It's not hopeless. And that's another thing. I don't want people often misinterpret what I'm saying when I talk about these things. We have to be able to be honest with ourselves about how bad it actually is. This is like dreadful. And it's not complaining and whining or thinking negatively. You're out of your mind. You're insane and delusional if you think that we're in a good situation right now. And no matter how positively you think about things, things only get worse. The more positive thinking I do, the more people try to piss me off and do terrible things to me because it makes them angry that I'm happy. That's a real problem in the world. So unless I want to go hide in a tent in the middle of nowhere and sing to the birds and the birds sing to me, I can't find peace, because most of the world has been made insane and destructive and nihilistic. That's a real problem. We are watching a literal genocide on television with tons of people supporting it, cheering it on. You understand what I'm saying? This is awful. We've always had these types of ethnic genocides, but now they're like prominent people are cheering it on. No, this is a nightmare. This is hell. What we're going through right now. I just gave you one example. I mean, we have a president that belongs in a nursing home that they're pretending is the leader of the free world. This is a kayfabe theatrical nightmare constructed as such to do some sort of psychological violence to us, to mold us and change us into more obedient prisoners. And someone at the top has a lot of power and is choosing to do incredible evil with it. It doesn't mean that's how it's always going to be, but it's certainly how it is right now. And I think that we really need to, if we're going to change it, we have to like come to terms with it. But we also shouldn't try to escape it. We shouldn't try to like escape it and like tell ourselves it's not as bad as it really is, or oh, it's, God will win, keep calm, carry on. We shouldn't do that. If I were to like go into a tent and go into the middle of nature, it'd be in revolution and resistance against it. It would be because I could no longer conduct myself without feeling sick to my stomach in the world. You understand what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't want to give it any power anymore. It wouldn't be like running away from it. It would be like not participating. There's going to be a point, if this keeps going in the direction it's going, that you're going to have to make some really tough choices. If they keep getting what they want, because what they want is a techno-feudalism. They like the homesteading thing. I'm not saying homesteading is bad. Homesteading is great, but they're just trying to make you into feudal land workers so that you make all the fresh food for them, and then all the cities are going to become giant batteries, and the human beings are going to be the cells of those batteries by being put into pods, and they're going to daisy chain their consciousness with Neuralink, and they're going to pull off the static electricity off of their bodies while they're in the pods, because they're going to be put into stressful scenarios. So they're going to charge your batteries and they're going to use your consciousness as their actual AI. They don't plan on making AI with silicone. They plan on making AI out of everyone that goes into the pods for VR. Like you guys are going to be, not you guys, human beings are going to be the processing chips. And then everyone that doesn't stay in the cities and doesn't get turned into a piece of the battery. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I'm telling you what they want. This should be obvious to everyone. This is what they want. Yeah, it's happening, like based on their game plan. What they want is they want a small rural population that they can control through technology. They want the land reclaimed by nature so they can use it better. And they want most of the people that are left to be inside of VR pods. So they're absolutely controllable. They have all their attention and they have their energy and the processing power of their brains. You understand how cost effective this is for them to turn every human brain into a supercomputer? I mean, you can't even imagine the processing power of a human brain compared to any computer they can try to make. This is efficient for them. And now I'm not saying this is where it's going. I'm telling you what they want in hopes that you won't do it. And that's going to require you getting off the internet eventually. Entirely until we can rebuild it into something that's actually good for us. The internet causes more mental illness. It causes increased unalivement. It's propaganda. It's every single social media company has been essentially taken over by clandestine organizations. Yeah, VR is no good, man. Like at the end of the day, VR is no good. Why do you need virtual reality? Do real reality. So that's what they want. Just understand that. Just understand that that's what they're trying to go to. So we have to be resistant to that in every way we can. I'll be honest with you. I don't have a lot of hope because I see that and that's not because I don't have hope in anyone. But if you look at the large majority of the population, they're going lockstep with this movement. People are brutal to each other. It's like embarrassing for me to watch 80 to 90% of any of the content online. It's embarrassing as a human being to see fellow human beings behaving the way they are. We've all whored ourselves out to whatever, some bad philosophy, to the almighty dollar. It's gross. I'm disgusted. 9 times out of 10, I'm disgusted. 1 time out of 10, I'm inspired. There are a lot of inspiring people, beautiful, inspiring people, which are also the same people that are the tortured souls that are doing the worst right now because they are so stressed out because they can see how crazy the world is and they feel powerless against it. And I feel like that too. I've said a lot of things, and I think, like I said, there's a lot of people that appreciate it, right? I was in Nashville for a podcast it's called give me a second here. The International Traveler's House. It was the road trip podcast. We were in Nashville for a weekend, and then I was in Chattanooga for a little bit. But I never spent a lot of time. I did spend some time in Eastern Tennessee. I think you would consider it close to Knoxville, maybe more central. The Pigeon Forge area. So yeah, it's just folks, the situation is dire, which only means that we should be more inclined to act. Yeah, I love that area. I'd still be in that area actually if I wasn't making sure I didn't put all my eggs in one basket on on the global catastrophe stuff. Being in the Southwest has been a deep calling for me for some time, and I think I'm supposed to be here for at least a little longer. But yeah, I mean, if I were to pick a place in America to live, it would be Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia area. Funny enough, that's where my native heritage, um, um, the Uchee and Creek, the Muskogee Indians are originally from before they were taken on the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma. So it's always been a place that felt more like home than any place any other place that I'd ever lived. So fascinating little coincidence there. As long as the mental illness is so widespread amongst the population, as long as humanity is sick, no, we can't. We have to get better. But you have to understand, it's like the shamanic tradition, the indigenous traditions, the pagan traditions. These are the things we lost that we need. Doesn't mean we go back to a completely nomadic wandering species or society, but it means we have to bring back those things, like how when we woke up in the morning, we discussed our dreams and their significance and how they were parts of who we were and how we could learn to grow as human beings. And that's what we did before we had breakfast. And then we didn't overindulge. We only had as much as we needed, and we got outside and we breathed fresh air and we drank fresh water, and we loved and we hugged and we danced and we sang together. And this sort of, we need an archaic revival. We need boundary dissolution, things Terrence talked about a lot. We need something incredible to happen, which surrounds reason, love, justice, truth, beauty, a real treatise on what the objective good is for ourselves, for others, for the human being as a collective, for the earth as our home, and for all the other living creatures on it as our neighbors. And we need to find a way to interweave ourselves with each other's lives and needs and desires for happiness and redemption and meaning and purpose. We're very far off from where we're supposed to be. I don't know how we're going to get back anymore. I thought the culture war could lead to some completion, and it hasn't. The culture war has become more diluted. Just as Aldous Huxley said, it's not that they would censor all the information. He wrote to George Orwell. George Orwell and they had some conversations about whose dystopia was more likely. And Aldous Huxley said, I don't think there'll be, I think your hard tyranny of 1984 will be the front face at first, but it'll be replaced by my soft tyranny, where they won't need to censor anything. They will throw so much nonsense out. There'll be a sea of irrelevancy that you won't be able to sift through for truth. And that's the point we've gotten to. There is so much noise. There's so much nonsense. There's so much that is lie that even the sharp mind and sharp eye and sharp ear can't see as lie, that looks and feels like truth. That we can't even get back to these fundamentally obvious principles that held together empires for thousands of years, held together societies, communities, indigenous traditions, thousands of years, built the great monoliths, understood the positions of stars they couldn't even see without telescopes. There's so much hidden in the history too. And that's another thing I see, is that history is being hidden. It's like yesterday feels as far away as 100 years ago, because there's just so much, and most of it is nonsense. And we can't seem to just have stable, relaxing conversations. You understand? Speaking of Hermes, I think that what's required is a collapse. People who are not able to just appreciate reason and progress themselves need one of two things: a miracle or a catastrophe. People who are not thinking for themselves, who are not putting it as an actual objective to be great in and of themselves and seek righteousness and be better and put order and harmony into the world, need a miracle or a catastrophe. And that's why the apocalypse is always tomorrow. Because the miracle or the catastrophe doesn't seem to come. And so we're always furloughing, or whatever the word is, and delaying and continuing our suffering because we won't be the hero of the story. So I think we do need a great miracle or a great catastrophe. And it's because it's us that perform the miracles and everyone's waiting for some magical creature to do the miracles, it's far more likely that the catastrophe will come. Because catastrophe occurs when entropy takes over. And entropy is eating away at our organization right now. So it's far more likely that we will see a catastrophe before people wake the hell up. I'd like to see somebody achieve a great miracle and for that person to not be lynched in Illinois or crucified in Jerusalem. But that's the concern, because the prophets get burned at the cross. And people say, we need a prophet, we need the Savior. And every time the Savior comes, they're afraid of them. They can't take the truth that they tell, and then they get rid of them. So yeah, now they're just straight up ignored. Exactly. Like they don't even need to kill them anymore because no one will pay attention to them. So yeah, I do hope that many will start to go down the narrow path and get crucified by the rosy cross. Have a real conversation with the true one God and understand what this place is. It's a harrowing experience, but once you get there, just as Neil Armstrong said, once you break truth's protective seal, all things are available to you. You have to break truth's protective seal, which is the epitome of fear, the existential cosmic terrors. And if you can survive that, you become a writer of the lucid dream, which is reality. And so I hope that many people start to tap into that and they actually start performing literal miracles. And I hope that those people that do that are not turned into martyrs, that they are turned into the philosopher kings and queens, which will help rebuild reality. Kassan, I'll leave everyone with that. Yeah. If you want to go down this path, understand that it's extremely difficult, and some people are driven insane because they can't surrender their ego, which is the only reason that you people don't do too hot. But if you want to be baptized and crucified by the truth and become a true whole individuated human being and potentially gain some really powerful spiritual abilities, with intent, ask for it. I mean, you can use the phrase, I pray that the mysteries be revealed to me and my place in the universe restored. I don't really use that one anymore because my place in the universe restored sort of kind of like insinuates that I'm in a fallen state. Though if you think of it as I'm in a fallen state of mind or heart or spirit because I'm not thinking correctly, then that's fine. Don't make yourself out to be something like your very existence isn't good. More like you've fallen from the grace of wisdom. And so just with intent, request to be made into something that can be like a Christ, an enlightened one, a great prophet or a saint who can do good work. And I'm not talking about Christianity here. I'm not talking about any specific religion. I'm talking about being, like I said, the philosopher king or queen who can usher in harmony and reason into the world and take away tyranny and corruption and destroy it. for a world that works for all of us. Make that prayer every day with full intent. I want to be transformed into the thing which can bring about that world, that kingdom of heaven, that Atlantis 2.0. And you know, make a prayer, like make a beautifully poetic and prayer that really means a lot to you, that has basically what I just said. Um, any breathing technique to get rid of the ego? Yeah. I mean, if you do pranayama, yoga is quite good for ego dissolution or the ego dissolving, because it actually puts you into different brainwave states that like help you to kind of like see all of reality as like kind of one canvas, and you're like intrinsically connected to it, and so you stop kind of thinking as your own identity, viewing it and actually being more of a part of it. But I mean, even just literal, like just deep breathing and sitting in nature. Any meditation really is going to help you to disengage with these. The ego is a psychological construct, right? Like it's something you're maintaining through thoughts. And so learned thoughts. And so the unlearning of like all these preconceptions about what you are and what you're made of, and whether you're a collection of your memories and your degrees and your and the people you associate with. I mean, this is all parts of your ego, the religion and all that. The ego is just it's like your character, the character that you're playing, the goals and aspirations and all this kind of stuff. That's all that is. It's just like your perceptions, the I, like I am, like whatever your name is, and like where you've been and the experiences you've had and what people think of you. It's just all those characteristics, all these cultural devices or cultural data points that are overlaid over the physical manifestation is you as a human creature, right? So like literally just breathing. Full breaths all the time and not over engaging the mind, like letting yourself not think thoughts sometimes is all ways that you can kind of pull away from the ego. Jesus is not a real character, one, because that wasn't his name, right? The Jesus Christ who died on the cross for your sins is a complete fabrication by the Catholic Church to make you hate yourself, and also be lazy about not taking personal accountability for your sins, and instead putting them all on this comic book character that the Vatican created. Does that mean there wasn't a Yeshua who had the title of Christ, which means anointed? No, I mean, that's perfectly, I'm sure there was not just 10, but many enlightened ones that were able to do some incredible things, that were very wise. And we see it all the time. Muhammad, Buddha, whoever Yeshua or Yahshua was, right? Because the reason we struggle so much with the Jesus one is because that's one that's been doctored the most and like kind of repackaged. It's like Bob Dylan says, flesh-colored Christ that glow in the dark. Like Jesus has been made into a commodity of control. And so it's really more important that we focus on the teachings of Christ and what Christ means, right? Searching truth. That's a great way to say it. It's hard on the brain, but it's worth it. It's hard on the brain to really come to truth. And interestingly, your name is Searching Truth. It's perfect. Yeah, the real truth of this, there's a lot of, but here's the issue. The issue is that the truth is only terrifying because we've been fed so many lies and become so comfortable with lies that the truth is unnerving. The truth to find out that the bad guys won some time ago and you're living in their world, that's hard. The truth that there's just not this good God in the clouds that's just waiting to save you at the perfect time, that's hard because it's existential. It's foundational to what you think you are, your meaning and your purpose. Imagine flipping that upside down on somebody. That's why most people push back on this stuff. Not that it, I mean, it's, I mean, I know it's true. I've been there. It's potential that there's a good God, but he's losing his case by allowing this to continue going on, to jump down at some appointed time. I can't imagine how this would be good for any of us. So this idea that a good God's coming down to save, no. What's probably true is this is a neutral playground. And right now the bullies took over the playground. I'm talking about reality itself. That's probably the truth. That's very hard for people to come to terms with because they need a fairy tale, because they lack the courage and the passion and motivation to do the right thing, to stand up and do the work, because it's scary, because people are afraid to get hurt. People are afraid to be unalived. I get it. But that's, again, this attachment to the ego, right? We all got to go someday, so it might as well be for something that matters, or be able to fight for a world where we can all be happy. So that's my stance on that. All right, we've been going for like 2 hours, and it's time for me to get out of here, folks. Still around. I might do some updates. You'll probably see me more talking smack on X in 288 characters. What is it now? I don't know. Thank you everyone for being here. This is quite the turnout. It's probably the biggest turnout we had on TikTok in a long time. It brings back memories. We used to be able to get 300 people on here, so that was really cool. Thank you everyone for being here. John, thank you for being here too, man. Grego, thank you everyone. Love you too, man. I appreciate all you guys a lot. Keep fighting the good fight. Think of this more for me as like a break. Look, I always say this, right? And I always come back, but I need to disconnect from the internet and reconnect with like these things that mattered. And I don't know what that means or how that's going to work, but I need to have some real TLC and some whatever it's called, R&R and all those other abbreviations. So I hope everyone else tries to do the same, at least periodically. Try to fast from this as much as you can. And remember these things that I've said, and consider the possibility that this inner work, this crucifixion on the rosy cross of the Rosicrucians, and really surrendering to the truth. Love you too, friend. Is where it's at. And by the way, Jackie, we still gotta tell the world about what you're doing. So there'll be a couple more videos where I'm going to be helping a friend with the project she's working on to put her good into the world. So you'll see a couple of those videos, because we're working on doing a couple of shout outs, which I'm happy to do for this person. And but yeah, it's just nothing's happening. I think I've said everything I need to say, so I just be saying everything twice, right? I'm not going to do these stupid clickbait. I'm not trying to get more views. I'm not trying to get more followers. I wish they would have let me get as many followers as I was supposed to, because they did throttle my account down. And I could have spoken to more people, but it was never about that. I don't collect the money on the TikTok creator, whatever it's called, because I wouldn't give them my ID. So this wasn't about money. This wasn't about followers. It wasn't about likes and engagement and all that. It was just to try to help the situation that we're in. So hopefully I had that effect at some level. I think obviously I've affected some people in a positive way, so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, it's kind of becoming like a tired trick, isn't it? The whole thing's inundated with chaos and nonsense. It needs to reach a fever pitch, so that the truth, people start seeking the truth. People get tired of the lies, right? Because this stuff isn't good for anybody. And I think eventually, hopefully, people will start seeking truth and seeking a return to normalcy. This can't go on forever. This indulgence with chaos and hedonism and dishonesty, that only leads to the collapse of civilizations. We've seen that over and over again throughout history. So people will eventually thirst for the truth, I think, if we make it on the other side of this, and then we'll be able to hopefully move reality in the right direction. So love you guys. Have a wonderful I think it's Saturday. I'll see you around, but it's time to get some meditation in. Drink some water, breathe fresh air, take walks in nature, disconnect from the nonsense, get back to what matters. God bless you.